to this edition of Tech Channel's Ask the Experts. My name is Dawn May. I'm a former IBMer, and I now work as a consultant helping shops with their IBM I. I'm also the current president of Common North America, the user group. I'm your Tech Channel Ask the Experts moderator. Today, we're going to talk about Maxava HA and what makes it a good choice for large IBM I environments. Let me introduce our experts. First of all, Ash Giddings. Ash is an IT professional with over 30 years experience in and around IBM mid-range servers. He is currently the product manager at Maxava, a leading provider of disaster recovery, high availability, and cloud-based monitoring solutions for IBM I and beyond. Ash is a member of the Common Europe Advisory Council and an IBM champion. And I want to note that I've known Ash for many years, as I was the IBM program manager for the SEAC back before I left IBM. Ash, I hear you have an interesting story you'd like to share to get us started today.
Yes, thank you, Dawn. Good to be here. Well, for a short period of time, I was the unofficial World Conker champion. And I'm not sure if Conkers is actually played anywhere in the world outside the UK, but it's basically a game played with the nut from a horse chestnut tree on a short piece of string, and the aim of the game is to smash the other player's conker, and each player has kind of 3 swinged attempts. And the championship actually takes place where I live in the UK, and people from all over the world travel each year. And a friend of mine won it once, and later that day, after he won it, I actually beat him. So in my head, I was the unofficial world, or possibly even the official World Conker champion for a period of time. So that's my claim to fame.
That's very interesting and something I've never heard of before. Thanks for sharing that. And now on to our second expert, Martin Norman. Martin is the Business and Services Operation Manager and is acting as technical project liaison to new and existing cloud partners, MSPs, and other customers. And I hear you also have an interesting story to share.
Oh, I don't know whether I can compete with world champion, but yeah, my sporting expertise is in the area of table tennis or ping pong to my fellow Americans. With my work, I've played competitively for a long time now. I represented England at the schoolboy level, my university, my county. Also, I've been a Pennsylvania state champion. But what I have tried to do is when I travel on business and I know I'm going to be away for a longer time, I try and take my bat and things with me. And I've played in Vegas and San Francisco, Connecticut, Auckland, New Zealand, and even one of the most beautiful cities I've ever visited, which was Istanbul, Turkey. So, yeah, not a world champion, but I enjoy my sport.
Very nice. Fascinating. I just like learning a little bit about what people do with their fun times. All right, so let's get started. I know you've both worked in aspects of systems management on IBM I, monitoring, scheduling, security. So what was the most surprising thing you found in the HADR space when you joined Maxava?
Yeah, that's a good question, Dawn. I've been with the Maxava, I think, for close to 2 years now. And the number one thing that kind of struck me was how few businesses are actually roll swap ready. In fact, I'll probably estimate it, there's probably less than 50% that regularly roll swap. The other 50% just don't have any confidence, or it's just not on the agenda at all. And I was absolutely staggered by this, because in my head, at some stage, the concept of high availability has been sold to the business and the software has been installed and set up and implemented. But really, that's just the half the job. If you can't roll swap, you're almost as well not to have the software in the first place. It's not just a box ticking exercise. It acts as an insurance policy. And the best environments really are those that swap regularly and stay swapped, and then maybe swap back 2 weeks later or a month later or 6 months later. And what happens then is this becomes standard operations or sysadmin practice, and not this elephant in the corner that everybody tries to avoid. I don't know what you think, Martin.
Yeah, I found exactly the same thing. In a way, it was a little bit like the work we have both done in the security space. Often security tools were shelved where people didn't really commit to them. But yeah, not using a role swap has always been a critical part, and something I was very surprised. But one thing we've done at Maxava, we've introduced something called a simulated role swap, which allows people to do much more preparation and testing before they do that full role swap, because it can be daunting to move towards that. So we have the SRS, and in a perfect world, we encourage them to perform multiple SRS throughout the year and at least one full role swap as well. And that full role swap, as I said, we can enable people to stay in that configuration for an hour, 2 hours, a day, 2 days, a week, a month, 6 months, a year. That's really important. And just to prove how important it is to Maxava, we have a commitment to new customers that when we've completed their implementation on the IBMI, those systems will be ready to roll swap, guaranteed. That's really important to us.
Yeah. Do you have examples, either really successful cases or maybe some embarrassingly disastrous situations that have happened with customers if they're ready to roll swap or they're not? You know, I'm sure the best ones are great, but I always like hearing about horror stories.
Yeah.
I can't share a horror story. I could share I previously worked at a managed service provider where they had one customer that had 4 boxes in different geographical locations. And each of these 4 boxes, it was quite an unusual setup, replicated to if you like, a box in the middle, a target box, which was called Central. And each of the 4 live boxes was swapped regularly. So I think it was every 2 weeks, one of the live boxes was swapped with the Central run. And they ran on Central for 2 weeks. And then 2 weeks later, they swapped back. And this continued throughout the year, throughout the 4 live boxes, and really became a finely oiled machine, I guess you can call it. So conducting a role swap became, like I mentioned, it was standard practice, and it was just another operations task. So that was a really good example that I was involved with. And I understand it's still going on today, this finely oiled machine, which is good to hear.
Yeah, a large part of my job is actually taking part in early discussions with organizations who maybe have had experience with another legacy system. And one of the most important questions I ask is, describe your last role swap. Now, that regularly leads to 2 answers that concern me. The first of those is, we haven't, because we don't have confidence. It goes back to what Ash was just saying. They don't have confidence it'll be successful. Now, that's absolutely frightening. But the second type of response, just as worrying, starts with a long-running description of how they start preparing for a role swap 2 weeks before they do it, and they run extra reports, and we fix things, and they save and restore, and they do extra audits, etc. They're obviously very organized, but to me, a role swap needs to be performed with as little preparation as possible. You need to be ready at all times, not just after a 2-week period of preparation. So that goes back to the point Ash was making. We want people to be role swap ready.
That makes sense, because if you have something that really bad happens and you got to do it, you don't have time to prepare, right?
Exactly.
So let's talk about the data integrity between the source and the target system. What's a critical aspect there to being able to successfully do a role swap?
Yeah, it's funny, Dawn, because initially, Maxava didn't actually include any audits, and those that have got high availability software will understand what audits are, and I'll explain in a minute. But we didn't include them, as we were that confident with regards to the data integrity and keeping source and target in sync. But what we discovered is it's no longer enough of software just to do its job. Customers wanted proof that the software was doing as it was intended for. They needed, and against that word again, that insurance, or a belt and braces, as we say in the UK. And Maxava actually provide flexible auditing at, I guess, multiple levels for customers to actually check their data. So we have something called existence audits, and these check an object is basically physically on the target system. We have description audits, and they check the object and its key attributes. And then content audits, check the data, they actually check the data contained within an object. And then, of course, we can handle orphaned objects as well. So those that maybe have been deleted on target and still exist on source. And we've added some flexibility, really. So the audits can be run for any configuration, any library, any object, or a generic list of named objects or a group of object types. And not only that, they can be run in what we call a full fix mode, or they can be run in log only. So you can just see in a log what was wrong, if anything. And we actually show these results in logs, and these can be viewed via a GUI or even a green screen interface. And from these interfaces, you can see the logs, and optionally you can manually resync them if you like. And in conjunction with Maxava H8 Autonomics, we can also process partial database audits for large files, these big files that everybody seems to have now. So those files that are maybe, if there is a mismatch for whatever reason, the files that are, they're just too big to save and restore, you're never going to be able to obtain a lock on that save because it's in use all the time. So if we do find a data mismatch on a large file, we send the request back to the source to say we found an issue with a block of records, and start auditing the file at block level. So dozens and dozens and dozens of small 8K blocks, thus splitting the file virtually into many, many segments, with audit requests sent across the network for each segment. And when we find a bad MD5 signature check, we just request a resync of that bad 8K block, so a tiny block of that large file. And we found that's incredibly efficient. And in fact, we've also found that where we've outstood a competitive solution, where audits maybe didn't complete within 24 hours, Maxavas actually do. So that's something we're very proud of. I think you've got some to add here, Martin, as well, haven't you?
I was just going to add a couple of comments. At a high level, I always try and remind a customer to treat the target server with the same respect that they treat production. Don't just install it, set it up, and then forget about it. It's an important system. It should be just as important to them as the production source system is. So review the health, check the audits that Ash was talking about, and respond regularly to what you see and immediately to what you see. In a perfect world, and again, I think I mentioned this before, in a perfect world, the customer should not allow anyone apart from the HADR administrators onto that target system. So there's less chance of any local corruption if somebody gets on and updates a file on the wrong system. But the reality is QA is often performed on the target server, or business intelligence queries or data transformation. That all happens there. So yeah, it isn't a perfect world. Because of that, there is always a chance that the data has got changed on the target, which is an issue. And as Ash pointed out, we've got tools to fix that, but try and minimize it. Try and get it down to something that's as minor as possible, and keep an eye on that health of the system.
Awesome. So when we talk about role swaps, when customers perform role swaps, are there adverse effects in that environment, like people that are on that source system? Does it impact them in any way? Or is there planning that has to go on? Tell me about when you do a role swap, what that means for those source system users.
Yeah, well, there's a couple of things that we obviously try and we're not putting ourselves in a situation where we tell our customers, you're going to take our software and now you're going to suffer. Excuse me. What we're trying to do is we're trying to work alongside the production system, the live system. So one part of that is that we always try and be low impact on the production system. So during the normal workday, we're doing as little as possible on production. We're doing most of our work on the target server, which is good for processing, for CPU, etc. But the other thing is that commitment to be roll swap ready that we talked about earlier. That will minimize downtime when the customer chooses to do a roll swap or even has a failover situation, a disaster declaration. We normally find that our part of a roll swap, the parts that the technical stuff in the background, is actually completed way before the local IT department has had time to do all the tasks they need to do. So the connectivity they need to do for all their users to get onto the new server, or the connectivity of the extra servers which circle around the IBMI, feeding data in and taking data out, the system setup, all of those things, and then all of the checks and balances that they should be doing before they let those live users on. All of that happens. Our part of it takes less time than that time. So we have that commitment to not have the customer, and in particular the production users, waiting for us. We don't want that to happen. We want to be as quick as possible.
Excellent. So let's talk about our friend, the integrated file system. Over the years, we've had the IFS around for a long, long time. But over the years, there are shops that have more and more and more data in the IFS. How has this impacted the replication, and how does the IFS usage work with HA and DR solutions?
Yeah, the IFS is an absolute minefield, but here's the thing. Many competitive solutions to Maxava, they opt to use the audit journal, QAudJourn. And with security high, very near the top on everyone's agenda, the use of the audit journal is it's an increasingly valuable tool. I think you can monitor over 70 auditable events now via that. But in large environments, it can become overwhelmed with hundreds of thousands of entries every minute. In fact, I've worked on some environments that generate over 300,000 audit journal entries every minute. And over-reliance on the audit journal for high availability is really a no-no, because those tools are actually reading vast number of events, which in turn can consume a large amount of CPU on the source machine. It can also lead to bottlenecks, which in turn can cause delays in replicating crucial transactions to the target server, potentially leaving the business vulnerable. So our thought process is different, and that the audit journal, as the name denotes, is best served as an audit tool. So how it works in Maxava is we require the IFS to be journaled, which allows us to, on the target, multi-stream apply sessions. And we can define a minimum and a maximum number of applies. Kind of 3 to 5 works with most customers. So, for example, if 3 is defined, 3 apply sessions to start with, we use 3 all the time. But if a backlog builds up for whatever reason, a legitimate backlog, a 4th gets started automatically, and if need be, a 5th. So the standard tends to be 3, and we tend to find that 5 apply sessions works with the kind of the very top end environments with huge IFSs. But in theory, there's no limit there. And we find that the multi-threaded IFS replication process, it really increases throughput. So that replication is dramatically faster and far more efficient in, let's just call them high volume IFS environments, which are more and more commonplace now. Many applications use the IFS not just for logs, but also for day-to-day running the application now. But it can be very much an Achilles heel for many not just high availability, but backing up and recovering and everything. So we like to think we've got the IFS right.
So you've talked about some things that appear to be unique with Maxava. Are there other features you want to highlight that are something that you do differently?
I think picking out a lot of the things that Ash just said, I think are unique areas. So the multi-threading, the multi-streaming, and the way that we perform everything in the right sequence is relatively unique because we're not relying on the audit journal. We don't have to trawl through looking for things. So if you think of something simple like creating a duplicate object maybe of a file, maybe a massive file, we have seen the situations where the data could start arriving on a target on the competitive solutions before the actual file's been created, which isn't really very helpful. So there are little unusual things that happen that we found a way to get around that. We created a technique that we've called command intercept, and it performs the most critical part of the dynamic replication of objects. IBM Remote Journaling works really, really well for the data, and IBM have made lots of really good enhancements over the years to the way that works. But there's still elements of other replication, whether it's programs or data areas or whatever, other objects that need to also get across to the target server. So we have this command intercept, and we use a library called Maxsys within that really is very special, very unique. It avoids that heavy workload on the production system. It avoids trawling through the audit journal, as Ash pointed out. Best thing to do, we can do demonstrations of how that works. So contact us and we'll arrange a demonstration. But it is, it's a great feature.
Yeah, and I think Martin, just to add to that, something that's popped into my head is MQ, or I think it's called IBM MQ now. That can be somewhat challenging. Many people rely on it.
Yep.
As an interface, not just between but disparate machines and disparate platforms as well. But it can be challenging to replicate for some. So we replicate that via the AMQ-JRN journal with remote journaling, and the activity is deposited from the source MQ via the backup copy of MQ in replay mode, which they actually process via MQ itself. So this is a tried and trusted process as documented by IBM. And this allows us to replicate the MQ manager activity by providing a copy on the target system ready to be used. And we've had some great feedback from customers who've switched to Maxava with regards to MQ, because again, like the audit journal, it can be incredibly kind of heavy usage. So we're chuffed to pieces with MQ and how that responds to replication.
Yep.
Very interesting. Are there other aspects of Maxava that can have a major impact on your role swap readiness?
Yes, I've kind of alluded to it once or twice. Autonomics. So Maxava's got something built in called autonomics, and that's designed to correct any object discrepancies between source and target or prod and backup during replication automatically as well. So if an object is detected as being different between source and target, autonomics provides a functionality to correctly resync that object. And our philosophy is that it should be unnecessary and really a nice to have and used in rare circumstances where, out of sync situations have occurred, maybe with one or two files. And the first objective is always to ensure that accurate replication occurs and that autonomics is just not necessary. But if we do get one of these situations, it's important to have resources available to ensure detection at the earliest possible time, so it doesn't get too out of sync. The root cause kind of ascertained and corrective action taken to resolve this issue and preventing it from reoccurring in the future. And Maxava Autonomics works kind of efficiently and effectively in the background while normal operations continue, really. And we have kind of 4 modes of operations with Autonomics. We have fix immediately. So a problem's detected and it's fixed there and then. We have the ability to fix it at a time defined by the customer. We have the ability to report the issue but don't fix it. And a rather odd one, not to report or fix it. And all of these are user configurable. So you can choose which course of action you want to take place. And the benefits of using kind of Maxava HA Autonomics include that it's easy to configure. You can configure settings at a system level, an individual library level, even object level. I think I mentioned you can fix it immediately, delay it, report, or even ignore. Maybe you've got a file for whatever reason that's always going to cause a problem. We can set that to ignore. And the ability to sync an object, or to be able to sync at object level using the partial record blocks for large files. And I guess going side by side, that is monitoring, really. So Maxava's always had a GUI as the primary interface. In fact, we had a GUI before we had the ability to do things on the green screen rather unusually. And that allows for the monitoring and configuration of multiple systems and configurations. There is also a green screen alternative to the GUI, which allows the system it's running on to be monitored and administered. And I guess further to that, we also have a browser interface that is currently in pre-production and will be generally available shortly. So again, that's at the request of customers. They need to see something lightweight, something modern, and something that fits into a browser. So we're excited to be able to share that. But I guess on top of that, for those that want monitoring of Maxava and other elements that contribute to a busy production environment, we have a solution called MI8. So MI8 Monitor is a comprehensive modern monitoring solution that helps IT teams to efficiently kind of manage their whole estate from a single holistic dashboard. And it's worth noting this is a cloud solution, so there's no need for any on-premise hardware whatsoever. And regardless of operating system or platform, you can gain real-time visibility into the performance and health of, and not just RA, but also AX, Linux, and Windows. And we find that this kind of unified approach eliminates the need for disparate monitoring tools that, they kind of morph over the years. You end up with specialist tools for different platforms or applications. There's no need for that anymore. It's a simplified process. It makes people more efficient, and of course saves valuable time and resources.
Can I take what you just said and spin it in a different direction?
You can.
Thank you. This is a little bit like a kettle calling a pot black, but we know in our IBMI space there is a greying of our workforce. Yeah, okay, me too. What we're finding in the IBMI world that we work in, that there is a steady reduction in the number of SME subject experts on the IBMI, and not just for HADR, but just generally the system itself. So things like the browser-based interface and the GUI-based interface for managing HADR that Ash mentioned is critical because of the new people we need to bring into our world. Similarly, the monitoring tool, one of the most important things we did with the monitoring tools to make it a great enabler for a partner. So a partner who looks after the systems, whether they are HADR or not, but the systems for their customers who want the single pane of glass view to be able to look after their customers on the most efficient way. That's really important because they are losing people all the time, unfortunately. So this is a critical part of the way that Maxava works as a business. We understand that the customers don't always want to look after another server, bringing in another server to replicate to, and then learn how to replicate and all of the clever things that Ash has just been talking about with the autonomics and the different ways of doing that, all of that. It's more for them to learn, and they're already busy. So we try as a company to provide services at whatever level they need. So we often share the workload of monitoring. So the MI8 tool that Ash talked about, we use it ourselves to look after our own systems. We use it to share looking after systems with customers. And we actually have some customers who really can't even spell IBMI, and we do most of the monitoring for them. And we have to translate what they're seeing as messages coming out of QSys Opera or wherever into English or Windows so that they know what the problems are that are occurring on their system. So we're doing that. We are helping with the shared monitoring. We are running training sessions. We run health checks. We help customers with migrations. We help them prepare for migrations. We help them invoke a role swap. We help them run the simulated role swap, all of these things. Now, we also work very, very, very closely with partners of many different types, some of whom provide some of those services, some don't. And then there are also those that even host that target server in their own data center and often offer a DR as a service package to wrap all that in so that the customer doesn't have to worry about replication, a second server, when they just don't have the skills to do that. So I think that whole services side and the reduction in the workforce of the experienced workforce in the IBMI space, we're trying to address that through a number of ways.
Yeah, skills is a big, important part of our IBMI community today. And so I like to give a shout out to Common and what they have as well to help in that space. So let's move on to the next question. Logical replication has been around for quite a while. How do you see its use now compared to the traditional use of HR and HA and DR?
Yeah, I can take that one. So logical replication really first surfaced in the 90s. That's when I first used it, actually. And traditionally, it was used as an on-premise solution between a couple of systems. It wasn't even partitions then. But over the years, as the business landscape has changed, IT's had to adapt and keep aligned. And logical replication has the ability, has the inbuilt flexibility to keep pace with that. And we see Maxava used on-premise within a single data center. We see it used in a co-location, maybe where a partner hosts a target partition, and increasingly common involving the hybrid cloud. So many are using the cloud for disaster recovery now, with logical replication as the vehicle, doing the legwork. And we have great working relationship with all the major cloud players, working on kind of opportunities with big, middle, SMB and large customers, both for production, DR, dev, test. And the beauty of remote journaling, which Maxava is built upon, is it can operate in both synchronous and async modes. So it really doesn't matter how far apart the partitions are. You know, there's a fix for that. There's a solution for that. We also find that another kind of benefit or use case for logical replication is migrations. So whether that's a hardware migration to say Power 10, increasingly common at the moment, or even migrating to the cloud, logical replication provides the ability to conduct these migrations by keeping 2 or more partitions in sync until such a time that you're comfortable that everything works, everything is accessible, the comms is in place, that the data is intact. So migrations is again a very increasingly common use case we find Martin?
Yeah, obviously we're seeing the increase in people looking at maybe a more hardware or storage based replication as well. And the interesting thing is that to me, people occasionally say, "Oh, so logical replication maybe not as important or as a different requirement." It's a different requirement. To me, this is the same as if you said to me, Dawn, "Why are we still using cars now that we have planes and helicopters?" Which is an interesting thought, given that I think it was this week the FAA published a timeline as to when they're going to start certifying air taxis. Now, I'm not sure whether I'll be the first off the rank to test that out, but it's going to be there soon, and there are changes afoot. But cars still have a critical part in our lives, as do mopeds and bikes and scooters and horses and even our feet. It really does come down to identifying the right solution for a user. Sometimes it's maybe hardware, often it will be hardware and logical replication, but for many organizations, logical replication is still the best choice. And often, as I mentioned before, they've got QA running on that target system, or BI, or extractions for another data warehouse. And the solution we provide helps them enable all of that. So it's still a very powerful and modern way of getting that replication going.
Well, thank you, Ash and Martin. You know, this has been really informative. I've learned a lot of things, and I hope our viewers have too. But I have one more question. What does
It's not a
Maxava
difficult one,
stand
is it?
for? Huh?
No, no difficult questions.
No, no difficult one. What does Maxava stand for?
Originally, the company was called Maximum Availability, and then over time, that shortened down to Maxava, or Maxava. We don't mind what you call us as long as you call us.
Excellent. So for those of you listening in, if you want to learn more about Maxava, visit their website. It's www.maxava.com. And be sure to check out the event resources at the bottom of the screen. And with that, as your Tech Channel Ask the Experts moderator, I hope you enjoyed our conversation today with Ash and Martin. See you next time.